Good day and welcome to Analyst Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual we'll have two parts to this particular discussion. First will be a general market segment, and at the end we'll have a tech/AI segment. This week we're going to have a slightly larger tech segment, and therefore we're going to have two stories in our general market segment. They are the latest in the Trump transition and then SA inflation. And in our AI/tech segment we look at full self-driving 13.2 from Tesla, as well as the latest in the OpenAI 12 days of AI. So let's start off with the Trump transition. The Trump transition started off with a bit of, I think a setback with Matt Gaetz, who was his pick for Attorney General, dropping out due to, lots of skeletons in his closet. I mean, this guy had not a one or two skeletons, he had an entire graveyard of skeletons in his closet, most notably surrounding, alleged payments to underage girls for whatever reason. He says just because they were awesome. Think of that what you will. Anyway, the pressure on him was so large that eventually he had to fold. And then the attention moved to Pete Hegseth. He was the person that Trump had put up the head of defense, and it looked like he was also going to falter. I mean, a couple days ago, the chance of him basically being confirmed was down around 10-12% on Polymarket, which is a betting site. Things that were going after him were notably the fact that firstly, he wasn't a high level military person. He had served in the military, he had served in combat, but he wasn't a general or something like that. He had basically, for the last few years been a talk show host, a TV host. There was an allegation of an assault made against him, of a sexual nature. There was allegations that he was, drank a bit too much, and a couple other things out there in terms of, past, workplace incidents, etc. And the belief had been that he was going to fall, Gates had fallen, and then they'd probably move on to people like Tulsi Gabbard and maybe RFK, as also people that Trump had picked that were unlikely to get the full support of the Senate, which is what's required here, by the way. Trump can pick somebody, but then they have to get approval from the Senate. Technically, the Republicans have enough votes in the Senate to get virtually anybody through, but they have to agree on it. And the idea was that some of Trump's picks were so against the Senate's kind of ethics or whatever, or just the beliefs of the Republican senators, that they would not be able to get through, even with the fact that the Republicans had, a majority in the Senate. But here, a strange thing has happened. There was a belief there's about 10 senators that were going to, go against any of Trump's most extreme picks. The Republican senators, that was, and of course the Democrats weren't going to vote for them, and therefore these extreme people are not going to get through. But it does seem to appear, whatever happened recently is that that's no longer the case. Pete Hegseth, for whatever reason, now seems to be almost a certainty to get through. 80+% chance, 90% chance of him getting through. And the reason is that Trump basically has applied pressure, including things like threatening the primaried. Primary means that you forget about going up against the Democrat. You don't even get to represent the Republicans if you don't win the primary. So it's almost like a semi-final to the final of the election. So you have to win the primary to get into the finals, where you actually go against the other party in the election. And if you basically lose the primary, which Trump has a lot more power over, then you don't even get to basically run up against your opponent in the full election. And an important figure, Jody Ernst, who was, some people thought that she would replace, Pete Hegseth if he basically was, not confirmed or decided to pull out or something like that there. She came out in kind of support of him, and that kind of changed the whole dynamic around Trump's transition. Now, if we get Pete Hegseth through, then people like RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Dr. Oz, will all be much more likely to get through as well. Because if you basically, cave on one, you're probably going to cave on quite a few others. Which means that Trump is going to get into power with a lot more power than people, had thought maybe a few days ago. And at the same time, we also saw that the head of the FBI has come out and said he's going to resign when Trump takes over. He has 3 years left. Generally, how the FBI works is that someone's appointed for 10 years and goes through, at least 2 administrations and a half before they are removed. Trump basically has said upfront he's not going to keep Ray along, even though he's the one that appointed him in his first term. We're talking about 8 years ago. But Ray now has said that he's not going to be, continuing once Trump takes over. That leaves it open for Kash Patel, who is Trump's pick for the FBI to take over. And the FBI is unusual in that, even if he wasn't confirmed, he would still have like half a year, or more than half a year, in which he'd basically run the FBI as an acting director until he basically had to be confirmed. Now, what has happened with Pete Hegseth, what has happened with some of the other picks that Trump has put forward, it seems very likely that that's going to go through. And in other Trump support, Mark Zuckerberg has come out and said he's going to donate $1 million for the Trump inauguration. The inauguration party that kind of kicks off the presidency usually is funded to a certain extent from donors, etc. And it's not just an official party, and that also may be an indicator of a changing tide. Obviously, Zuckerberg knows that Trump is not a very big fan of his. Elon Musk is not a fan of his, and he's a big player in the Trump administration. Because J.D. Vance is also not a big fan of him. He's the vice president, and I think that the kind of moves that Facebook are making does indicate the kind of sea change that's happening in the administration. And one final thing, Lina Khan is also gone, and I think that's also going to be very important because I think one of the major impacts of the administration going forward is going to be much more merger and acquisitions happening. And Lina Khan has been quite a bit of a hindrance to that. She basically didn't find many mergers that she liked, and in fact had proposed the idea that if a merger had occurred even in the past and then it later been seen to be a negative for the population or for the country or whatever, it could be reversed. And that's the kind of approach that is no longer probably going to be in play in the government, and that means that we are likely to see more merger and acquisitions happening, which will be, I think, in terms of investors returns, one of the more impactful things of the Trump administration at the start. Then moving on to SA inflation. SA inflation came in slightly higher than it was in the last period, but still below 3%, which is the bottom end of our target. Our target is 6%. If inflation is below 3%, even though it's slightly higher than the previous period, technically you could argue that we should be cutting interest rates more aggressively than we are at the moment. Food inflation as well was a lot lower than it has been for a while. Now, why is this an important thing to talk about? Because inflation, of course, and interest rates are some of the key movers for things like the currency, for the overall stock market, etc. in a country. And the fact of the matter is that the Reserve Bank has been very cautious in terms of cutting interest rates. In the face of falling inflation, like we've seen, in the face of international governments cutting their interest rates. We saw Switzerland recently cut their interest rates. We've seen the US cut. Around the world, there's been a cutting cycle because inflation is no longer the problem that it has been in the past. Now, the important thing to remember here is that we in South Africa are a very small and very open economy. The rand is very vulnerable to international movements. The fact that the rand has been as stable as it is, and as I speak to you, it's around about 1765 to the US dollar. And we've experienced like levels close to 20, a few years ago. So it's been relatively stable for the last several years. And in fact, over the last 30 years, yes, there's been some fluctuation, but we've kind of like weakened at a really steady rate against international currencies over that period of time. 30 years is a long period of time to establish your credibility. And you compare us to like other parts of the world that you're comparable to us, other parts of Africa and other parts of the emerging world, places like Turkey, places like Nigeria, Egypt, etc. And you look at the currency, our rand versus the dollar, and the lira, the Turkish lira versus the dollar, or the naira versus the dollar, or the cedi in Ghana versus the dollar, and you'll find that the rand has been surprisingly stable. And the benefit that's had on our economy cannot be overstated. When you have a currency that's depreciating, like the lira, the Turkish lira has over the last, say, 6-7 years, going from about 3-4 to the US dollar to like 20 to the US dollar, that is not something that you can have sustainably in a country and still expect investment to occur in a proper way, and still expect people just operate businesses in a normal way. Eventually, that kind of rate of weakening converts or translates into a far more vulnerable country in a number of ways. Investments go down, more money looks to exit the economy People are focused more on protecting their currency or their currency holdings than investing and doing other things. It's a cancer that weakens the entire economy. And the fact that the Reserve Bank has been able to avoid that in South Africa over the last, like I said, 3+ decades, I think has had huge benefits to the country. So even though we haven't grown extremely fast over the period of time, there's been relative financial stability in this country that we have not seen in other parts of the world, that we have not seen in places like Turkey, Nigeria, etc. And I do think that in terms of the Reserve Bank's approach, you could argue this particular decision not to cut by a quarter instead of a half may have not been the correct thing. But I believe their philosophy over the last 30 years has definitely been the correct thing. And that's what I think we need to look at. Not one or two slight missteps by the Reserve Bank, but rather the overall path they've trod. And I think that overall path has been by far the best of which was any emerging market central bank. Okay. And now moving on to our AI segment. So first we're going to start off with Tesla and full self-driving. By the way, Tesla basically broke $400 dollars again. In fact, as I speak to you, it's about $420 per share, which of those for you that recall was the number that Elon Musk talked about in terms of that buyout of Tesla a while back. They got into a bit of trouble. An interesting fact, people know that Elon Musk has an obsession with two numbers. Like his obsession with the letter X. He's obsessed with the number 420 and the number 69. I won't get into why it is, but any Google search will give you an answer as to why 420 and 69 are important numbers. But the interesting fact is that yesterday, when it hit 420 to the US, the share hit 420 US dollars per share. The Tesla shares did. It was coincidentally year to date a 69% movement up for Tesla. So the fact that it hit 420 and was also a 69% year-to-date improvement was a bit of a coincidence that I thought was quite funny. Anyway, speaking of Tesla, two things came out of Tesla this week. Firstly, it was full self-driving 13.2, and then was also some video of the Optimus robot walking on uncertain territory, or like very, very unstable terrain. Like it was basically up and down a leaf-covered muddy hill. Now, the important facts to remember here: full self-driving version 13.2, huge improvements that we've seen over the previous models. And in fact, it's getting to a point right now where I would think that I would fully expect by the end of this year that full self-driving at this rate of improvement is accepted as being at least as safe, if not significantly safer than a human driver. That's within the next year. So by the end of 2025, we should have that. That, given combined with Musk's relationship with Trump, could mean that we could see nationwide rollout of Tesla cyber cars by 2026. We could be seeing autonomous vehicles really take off across the US in the next year or so. The impact that will have on the world is not to be understated. The number one job in the world is driver. If you can drive a Tesla, you can drive anything. Okay, and that's what the technology is currently working for Tesla. So forklift drivers, truck drivers, a whole bunch of different things out there could easily be replaced in the next, say, 2 or 3 years. And like I said, number one job in the United States, number one job in the world is driver. Therefore, this could be one of the most important, impactful developments out there. It's not just about, I have a cool car and I have a Tesla that can drive me to work and back without me touching things. It's that the guy that has a job driving a truck across the United States does not have that job anymore. The person has a job, operating a forklift may not have that job anymore. And that, I think, is going to have a huge impact on the world. And it's not to be overlooked. And secondly, the Tesla bot, the Optimus bot, moving as it has over terrain, it's just showing how quickly this thing is advancing. Just a couple weeks ago, they had a video of it catching a ball and the dexterity involved in that. And now the fact that it's able to walk on very unstable terrain. It's terrain that I, quite frankly, would probably use my hands to get up and down. This bot is able to do that, not very easily, but it's able to do it. You have a robot that can move like that, and quite a few jobs become in its scope, within its scope, basically. And the job losses associated with that would be quite, I think, monumental. So the Tesla moves this week, even though it's not the number one thing happening in AI right now, with the 12 days of AI, etc. from or 12 days of OpenAI that's happening, as well as first mentioned Gemini 2 being released, Grok getting video, site capabilities. I think longer term, what Tesla is doing is likely to be the most impactful aspect of AI, as, like, especially if you look at the next, say, 5 years or so. Just because the fact of the matter is that driving the vehicle is one thing, the robot's another. The number of jobs that are combined, that are basically going to be affected by those two things, the vehicle and the robot combined, is just unbelievable. It's going to have a dramatic paradigm shifting effect on the global economy. And now moving on to the 12 days of AI. So this is what we've got so far. Of course, we've gotten the $100, package for getting unlimited access to the top level, program from OpenAI. Then there has been the release of Sora on Monday. Sora is their video program. And the other big news has been the release of the latest tie-up with Apple, Siri, the latest version of Apple's iOS. Siri there can link in very easily with GPT. And the fact of the matter is that that poses one of the biggest threats to Google's business model that's ever been. The tie-up with Apple is, I think, an incredibly powerful thing for OpenAI, and it also gives us some idea as to what the future does look for the company going forward. If they can become the alternative to Google for Apple search in the US and maybe globally, the impact on the world would be dramatic, on Google would be dramatic. Google has been willing to pay tens of billions of dollars a year to Apple to make its search engine the number one, the default choice on Apple products. If Apple was to basically tie up with GPT, or rather with OpenAI for this particular service, there's a reason Google is happy with those tens of billions. It's because they'll make a lot of money from that. The impact on their bottom line could be quite dramatic. It could also pose a existential threat to Google's dominance in the search business. They're already facing the difficulty in the, with the Justice Department around, monopoly behavior. And while they are facing this legal challenge, the fact that they're going to be hit with, such a powerful competitor, the most powerful competitor they've probably ever faced, would, be a very difficult blow to overcome, But I did mention the fact that they also have their own, AI system. And let us not forget, Google were the guys that created AI. They are like the Bell Labs of the modern world. Bell Labs created a whole bunch of technologies that kind of created the modern world, things like the transistor. And Google, to a large extent, have done the same kind of thing. But they have not been able to kind of fully exploit it as much as, just like how Bell Labs could not fully exploit what they created. It was up to other companies to make the full benefit of it. But Google knows this, it knows the history of it. And basically, the fact that the matter is that they're still releasing, cutting edge, programs like, or systems like, Gemini. The fact that they still have, plans to have their own things, like their own kind of glasses, which they've talked about in the past and they've tried in the past as well. The fact that they're still making moves in a variety of sectors, including the chip sector. And one of the news events this week was that, they had developed the world's most powerful quantum computing chip, which was able to basically do a calculation that a normal computer would take, I think, multiple septillion years. That's so many zeros you don't even count it. It's longer than the age of the universe. Those factors still make me believe that there's still an opportunity at Google to, succeed going forward, and that OpenAI and some of the moves that we've seen from them, though it is, quite impressive, don't count Google out just yet. And that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to speaking to you guys next week. Cheers.